If you've spent any time studying languages independently, especially with YouTube, you may have come across something called comprehensible input. But what exactly is this hypothesis? Hello, my name is Christopher and welcome to Ling, linguistics for the layperson. Or should I say, language acquisition for the layperson, because that's all we seem to talk about on this series these days. Anyway, in today's video, we're taking a look at the input hypothesis, one of the most significant theories in second language acquisition of the last half century. So, to understand this idea, we should first meet its author, Dr. Stephen Krashen, Professor Emeritus at the University of Southern California, who published the input hypothesis in 1985, detailing his philosophy on second language acquisition. And this comes just 2 years after his related work titled The Natural Approach. Hopefully, you will soon see the connection. In a nutshell, Krashen argues that exposure to comprehensible input is the most important aspect to acquiring language. This means input that is generally understood by the listener despite not knowing every single word. Ideally, this is about one level above the learner's familiarity with the language. And through this approach, he or she acquires language naturally or subconsciously rather than consciously, which is ultimately less effective for language production. Now, although the input hypothesis has come to define Krashen's approach, it's actually one of 5 related theories that I'd like to unpack, proceeding with the acquisition-learning hypothesis. This observes a clear distinction between language acquisition and learning as a subconscious and conscious process, respectively, the first of which happens when exposed to comprehensible input. Next is the monitor hypothesis, stating that this consciously learned language, such as deliberately studying grammar rules or vocabulary, can help monitor or measure language output, but fails to improve a learner's linguistic competence, his or her internal comfort with the language. Fourth is the natural order hypothesis, which, as the name would suggest, proposes a natural order in which language acquisition occurs, and perhaps contrary to popular belief, this order is not affected by the individual learner or instruction. It's the same for all. And fifth is the affective filter hypothesis, which is probably the most self-evident for language learners. It asserts that one's affect or mood has a significant impact on one's ability to acquire language. An affective filter is active, for instance, when a learner experiences negative emotions like anxiety or embarrassment when speaking, inhibiting the process. Now, these hypotheses have certainly been influential in language education, most notably in America, but also around the world. Most foreign language YouTube channels that I follow routinely discuss comprehensible input, techniques to reduce stress, and a so-called natural method. The Total Immersion series French in Action was in large part influenced by this approach. That's not to say Krashen hasn't received his fair share of criticism from other academics. That's not to say Krashen hasn't received his fair share of criticism from other academics. Some argue that the hypotheses are untestable and any real distinction between acquisition and learning is largely overblown. As such, there are competing theories, including the skill-based hypothesis and the comprehensible output hypothesis, but those are topics for another video. Personally, as someone with fairly extensive language learning experience, I'm fond of Krashen's method, but I do recognize its shortcomings. It's difficult to adapt for a classroom setting, and I'm fearful that it dissuades people from spending enough time with grammar, which cannot be completely overlooked. Some degree of conscious study is important, especially when you're not immersed in daily life like a toddler. And so I think a sort of hybrid approach is the best way to go. Alright, that's all for today. Please give this video a like if you learned something, and let me know in the comments section what you think of the input hypothesis. How do you incorporate comprehensible input into your language learning? What method do you find most effective? And what would you like for me to discuss next? Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video. My source is in the description, and as always, thank you so much for watching.